All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today. I think there's a few more people who have RSVP'd. We'll see if they can actually join us today, and we'll just be letting them in as we go. A couple Zoom things before we go too far. Do please, as everybody is right now, keep yourself on mute. It looks like it's going to be a rather small group, so at the end, we'll just unmute and we can ask questions. If you'd like to post a question in the chat as Julie's doing her presentation, we'll circle back to those at the very end. I am Kay Ogden. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Eastern Sierra Land Trust. And I'm just going to share a little bit about the Land Trust for folks who don't know too much about us. We are an organization that works with landowners. Hi, Randy. Landowners who want to permanently protect their land from sprawl and development. Obviously, when we can help have smart growth or limited growth in some areas, that helps the wildlife. Their migration corridors don't know which is public land and which is private land. They just have these, centuries old pathways that they do. And so by protecting large ranches from being developed, we're also protecting habitat for the wildlife. Let me know if you'd like to learn more about Eastern Sierra Land Trust and our land protection efforts. We do it through kind of a complicated tool called a conservation easement, and I am not going to distract us today and go down that wormhole, but if you'd like to learn more, just give us a call and I'd be glad to talk with you, or our lands director would be willing to do that as well. We also have an education programs, and so the education program runs our pollinator garden program. We do youth education. We do birds and bees out at Benton. We do all kinds of things with local youth and sometimes other groups that come up. And I'd like to introduce Gabrielle. She is our education coordinator and an AmeriCorps member. If you don't know about the AmeriCorps program, it's amazing. She has basically decided to give 11 months of service to Eastern Sierra Land Trust for minimum wage. And she works full-time job and she runs this entire program. So she was cream of the crop. We're so glad to have her as part of our team. And Gabrielle, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okie doke. Hi everyone. I want to thank you all for being here on a Saturday morning with us. A beautiful Saturday morning. So hopefully we can all get outside and enjoy that later. And before we get started, I want to give a brief intro for those who aren't familiar with the Pollinator Garden Project, which this Growing Together workshop series is essentially for, as we have really helpful and generous members taking the time to share their knowledge so we can essentially grow together and as gardeners and community. So through the Eastside Pollinator Garden Project, we work with you to help certify your gardens and outdoor spaces as pollinator friendly. And what this entails is 3 steps. The first step is me coming to your garden or video chatting and checking out your space. So we'll go over certification criteria, your visions, and help you with any questions you may have. Second visit or video chat would be me checking out your progress, and if it all looks good without plants in the ground, I give you a voucher for the California Native Plant Society's plant sale in the fall. So that will be in August this year. And that is to be announced, but just a little future note. And then lastly, the final visit is where I come to your garden space again and or video, and we will see your garden, your finishing product with all the plants in the ground. So, and then you'll get a certification sign from us. And so if you're interested, please contact me. And all that being said, we are extremely appreciative of all of our partners on this project, such as California Native Plant Society, Inyo and Mono Master Gardeners, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and our community members, Of course, Metabolic Studios, who's funding this project this year, and also we can do this without these supporters and also our presenters of these workshops and you all of you attending. So anyway, that being said, I want to welcome Julie. Julie will be our presenter today. She's a soil and habitat restoration ecologist, an expert, and a master composter. And you may have seen or met her before at previous garden fests. So now I'll give Julie the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today I'm going to talk about establishing native plants. Trade secrets from over 20 years as a restoration ecologist. So a little bit about me is been working as a biologist for pretty much my whole career. Me in northern Argentina counting flamingos in my early 20s, grad school. And so my focus really for this presentation will be kind of my experience with soil science, because it's a little bit of a neglected focus I find. And so we're going to talk about prepping soils for native plants. So in this presentation, I'll cover 3 different areas. What you need to do kind of pre-planting for site selection and soil preparation, and then the real secrets of installing native plants, and then a little bit about plant maintenance and how to keep them healthy and alive. So let's talk about a little bit some pre-planting planning on determining what plants do you want to grow and where. Well, native plants, like all plants, a big variety of what their needs are. Some like it sunny and some like it shady. Some like it wet, some like it dry. And so I think Katie Quinn will be talking quite a bit about gardening with native plants on May 3rd, and she'll kind of dive into like the different nuances of different plants and shade. But say this is an example of a house here, and this is the house that I just purchased. So if I were planning what to grow where, I would want to consider, so this is, north, so this is very shady, and this is very established side of the house. We got some really big full sun area here. And then some of the stuff's already on an established drip irrigation, and the irrigation needs may be different for the native plants. And you say for down here fruit trees, and this is grapes, and this is, a veggie garden. So those are some of the things you're going to need to help, figure out is, if I want to grow this color plant and this plant, where would it best suit my outdoor space? The plants come in different forms too, because you can use native plants as a shrub. You can create, there are vines, there are annuals. So there's an array of different things. And so planning out, you need to kind of look at what your property looks like and, where the little ecological niches are. One of the things I do want to cover is soils though. So one of the things I would do if you're not familiar with your soils and kind of, because soils in the Eastern Sierra vary greatly from, great soils downtown Bishop to the Mesa, which is, volcanic tuff, to Chalfont, which is salty soils. And so there's a lot of different variations. And so what I would do is I would just Google NRCS and RCS online soil mapper, and then up here you'll see this what it comes out with, and there's a little green button, and this will give you to kind of this screen. And so then you're going to enter your property address, and then it's going to come up with a little map, and then you create this little AOI and it gives you an output. So the same property it comes out with Hanova, extremely cobbly loamy sand, 0 to 9% slopes. And so then you can click on it and it kind of tells you what that means. So the Hanova series in this case is a shallow, well-drained soil formed from rhyolitic tuff. And so it's a well-drained soil. It has slow to medium runoff, moderately rapid permeability, which means it's going to be dry. And so some of the native vegetation here would be Nevada ephedra, black brush, spiny hopsage, needle leaf rabbit brush, and desert needlegrass. And those may be ones you want to grow, but maybe it's not. So, but it kind of tells you what native vegetation would grow there. But the real kicker here is, if you know, as you read the description for this particular soil, is depth the restrictive feature is 4 to 14 inches to lithic bedrock. That means at this particular location, there's only 4 to 14 inches of actual soil. So, so it's going to be really droughty and really shallow. So those are things. What that tells me is I've got to work harder in prepping my soils to allow both native plants and maybe even vegetables and fruit trees to grow a lot harder. So there's some, that's a kind of a quick tool to check in on like what your property looks like from a soils perspective. Hold on, sorry, wrong way. Okay, so then before you start to plant, the biggest challenge I find is if there are weeds. You need to take care of the weeds before you plant. And I know sometimes that's hard because you just want to plant now, but one of the biggest challenges in the Eastern Sierra is Bermuda grass. And this is, I didn't have a picture of Bermuda grass. This is a fennel. And there's actually, in this picture, there's some endangered plants that kind of lost. And so a lot of times you need to really treat the soil and get rid of the weeds before you actually plant, because once you put the plants in, sometimes it's really hard to get rid of it, particularly Bermuda grass, which can go to a depth of over a foot. So ways you can treat it is, if it's a large area, then you could just put plastic over it and solarize it, which kind of cooks everything. You know, you're also going to be cooking the good, you know, soil biology, but that's one way. And that's going to be a whole season before you can even plant. Some people use flame, which you kind of use that with very carefully, so you don't, you know, burn your house down or the neighbor's house down. You can hand remove, which is very labor intensive, but for little stuff, it's pretty easy. And you can also go, you know, with the chemical and herbicide treatment. And there's organic and non-organic types. So I want to cover that just briefly. And I could have a whole lecture on this, but I'm just going to kind of give you some very basic alternatives if you have a lot of weeds. So most people use Roundup and Fusilade. Fusilade's used for grasses. And these work great. You have to admit, you know, there's a place for this, is if you have massive infestations, it works great. But it's, you know, it can be harmful to soil. And, you know, there's been studies that shows it could be harmful to us as well. So if you want to stay away from this, there are some alternatives. Well, I call it non-synthetic herbicides, which you can call them organic, but not all of them are actually organic. And they fall into 7 broad categories. One is a corn gluten base, which is a pre-emergent weed killer. So it kind of kills things before they germinate. And that works both in grasses and broadleaf plants like mustard. There's natural acids, which is like vinegar, works great. Broadleaf grasses and perennials, so everything. But a lot of these alternatives require repeat application. And the reason why that is, and for pretty much all of them, it really just kills the leaf structure and it doesn't suck down into the roots. Like Roundup goes right into the roots, and that's why it's so effective, is it actually desiccates and it kills the roots. With a lot of these alternatives, it only kills the surface. And so you have to do a repeat application. And you can go right on the actual, you know, it's very specific. You know, there's herbicidal soaps, which seems to work with, you know, broadleaf grasses and perennials. There's these iron-based herbicides, which don't work on grasses or perennials. Salt-based, which I have it in here, and hate to even mention it because I would not recommend it at all. And then these phytotoxic oils, and this is really interesting. This is a weed crush, so that clove, peppermint, pine, citronella. This is something that I just purchased, and it's supposed to work well for like Bermuda grass. And so I haven't tried it yet, but it's sitting in its package, and maybe stay tuned. And then you have these combination products, which is, you know, maybe multiple things. Some are organic and some are not. So you really have to read what the label says, because some are harmful to frogs, and, you know, they're not all like, you know, feel good stuff. So a lot of times you can look at the different certifications. You can look for OMRI listed, CDFA, these are all certifications that they're kind of natural based. So, but not all of these alternatives are actually certified. So now let's move into like, okay, you're getting ready. So now you've prepped the soil, it's weed free, you found the perfect location, the perfect plant you want to grow. How to install the plant so that it's very happy. You got to remember, Katie grows up these beautiful plants in these lovely containers. And they've been watered, they've been fertilized, they've been loved, and they're little babies. And so you need to think about is when we're putting them in the soil that we need to create this transition zone. So we don't want to just stick them in the soil without any like buffer in between them, because it's too much of a shock and it's really hard on the plants. And it's kind of like, you know, throwing a teenager out into the desert and say, good luck. You need to kind of provide a little bit of love between so they can transition into the native soil. So what I end up doing is I end up creating these amendments to go around the potted plant. And I have a nice graphic that show you. And so there's different things that you can use. Now, you don't have to use all of them, but you can. So these are some of the things that I use in terms of allowing planting around the native plant to allow that nice kind of transition zone. And this is really kind of the secret of getting these plants to survive. So, and I'm going to go into a little bit more details, but the compost or vermicompost, mycorrhizal fungi, compost tea, which is this liquid, biochar, humic acid. You're going to need mulch, you need water, and of course you need plants. I do want to add that I think the CNPS native plant sale is going on May 10th through 15th. So we've already identified it's an online sale. So I just wanted to plug that. So the difference between an unhealthy soil and a healthy soil is pretty dramatic here. And I just wanted to kind of show you the difference of an unhealthy soil versus a healthy soil. See how there's a lot of aggregates. And so this is really why we want to build our soils, for all these reasons: improving plant production, it retains the nutrients, it suppresses disease. So these ingredients that I'm going to talk about really are a way to improve the soil so that native plants, as well as your vegetable garden, like any plants, will be a lot happier and be more productive when you have healthy soil. So let's talk a little bit about worm castings or vermicastings. And this is one of my favorite amendments. It's, you know, basically worm poop. And I think it's become a lot more common. I know at least 3 of the places in Bishop are now selling worm castings as one of their amendments. And it's amazing. It's got 50% higher organic matter than soil. You know, it has this ability, the worm casting has, you know, nitrogen, potassium, and all these other nutrients, but they're more plant available form. So it's kind of like the superfood. And by adding it into the backfill mix, it's going to provide some immediate nutrients to the plants as it needs to adjust to its new environment. So if there's one thing that you should go out and purchase, is this mycorrhizal fungi. And this is like the key, one of the key things to establishing your native plants. And I wanted to add this, it's not just native plants, like 80% of all plants on the planet require mycorrhizal fungi. And what this is it's basically a mushroom or a fungi that invades the roots, and it's like a plant assist. So it will go out and find water, phosphorus, copper, calcium, magnesium, zincs, and bring it back to the plant. And so there's this mutualistic relationship that the fungi get carbohydrates from the plant. So they get their like bread and, you know, sandwiches and other things from the actual plant that photosynthesizes. And then they go out and find the nutrients and give it back to the plant as a little thank you. It also helps strengthen the plant against like aphids, diseases, and other things. And so you can go on Amazon and Google endomycorrhizal fungi, and there's a host of different ones. And this is just one that I've used in the past. It's got 6 different species of mycorrhizal fungi, and it's got about like a 2-year shelf life. So this is really important to add to the soil, and it goes, you'll apply it directly to the bottom of the planting hole. So biochar is another one that I've started to experiment with just in this past year. Particularly, it's important for really droughty soils. So going back to the example of the terrible soils of this property I showed you, very well drained, it doesn't hold on to water. And so the studies have shown that biochar can actually help retain water in the soil. And it's really just a form of carbon. It's like charcoal, but they process it a little bit different. They also find it increases this microbial activity, which again is like the mycorrhizal fungi, and there's more to it than that helps the plant get stronger. And so then we're also, by adding the biochar, we're also contributing to carbon sequestration. So it's good for the planet too. So one of the things you need to do is it comes in this dry bag, and you need to pre-inoculate it with compost tea, or at least soak it with water and compost to, quote, activate it. So that it requires a little bit of advanced planning. They say anywhere up to a month, like a week to up to a month. So you soak it, and so then you'll add it to the backfill mix. This is a little bit harder to find because it's not super common, but I think you can get it on Amazon if you're not going up to Reno or something like that. And then, so if you're out in Chalfont, this is a great tool because Chalfont has really high salts, and humic and fulvic acid have been known to kind of tie up the salts to make it more to allow the soils to be a lot more user-friendly for any sort of plant, native or non-native. So there's two different types. It's in California, it's all called humic acid, but there's actually a fulvic acid and a humic acid. And humic acid is actually black, and the fulvic acid is golden. They're just kind of slightly different. It comes in liquid or dry form, but what you definitely want, if you want to order it, you want it in a water-soluble form. So that comes, some brands are really coarse, and it just will take too long to decompose. Just something that's super fine works better. So in addition to sequestering salt, it can actually help, again, restore soil biology, which are so important for plants to be healthy and happy. And also, they say that it helps enhance nutrient uptake. So that's another one I like a lot. And then, of course, yours truly at the Eastern Sierra Land Trust May Garden Fest when it was live. That's why I was making tea there. And so compost tea, what that is, you take compost or vermiculture and all the microbes that are attached to the organic matter, extracts it off the surfaces, and then we feed it and we give it air, and they multiply and multiply and multiply. So it's this concentrated solution of microbial activity that you can add directly to the soil. You can add it to the leaves. The farmers in Napa Valley apply it to their leaves to prevent leaf mold. Harvard University applies it all on other lands. And so this is kind of a universal superfood, I guess I call it. And I do believe the native plant sale that's happening May 10th and 15th, they'll be offering compost tea that I'll be making, and you'll order that online in advance. So it will be available. So now let's talk about the best way to install your plant. So this is a 1 gallon example, and I think Native Plant Society has a slightly smaller. They use like rose pots that are similar in depth, but a little bit skinnier. But we'll use this as an example of how to best install your native plant. So here you have the container, and so you want to take it out of the pot. And so this is a 1 gallon. So what I recommend is that your planting hole is at least twice as wide as the native, the width of the pot. So if this is 12 inches, you go 12 inches here, 12 inches here. And also, this doesn't show it, but I also recommend you go below the area. And so you're going to dig out your hole, and the excess here, you create a little finish, like a watering basin, a little hole, so that when it waters, the water stays in this basin. And then depending if you live in downtown Bishop, or you live on the Mesa, or you live in Chalfont, or wherever else, how good your soil is you're going to mix the native soil with this backfill mix. And this backfill mix is the compost, the biochar, the humic acid. And so like on the Mesa, terrible soil. So I'd probably only use like 25% of the native soil. And then the rest, I would just use the love. And this provides this transition between the lovely planting median that was grown in and going out to the native soil. So this is a really important part of establishing your native plants. So when you put the plant into, the first thing you want to do is put your mycorrhizal fungi so it is attached to the roots. Taking it out, if there's like a little bit of root bound, you want to loosen up the roots, but not really break them. And then you can either dust the root ball with the mycorrhizal fungi, or you can just place it kind of in the bottom of the planting hole. And then you're going to put the amendments back in the back. I call it the backfill. And then you're going to tap it down just a little bit with your foot. And so what you want to make sure too is that the root crown of the shrub is about 1 inch above the finished grade. So here's the finished grade and here's the root ball. So just an inch, that's all you need. And then you're going to water it, and you're going to water it good. And Roberta has a whole lecture coming up. I think it's next weekend that she'll be talking about drip irrigation. So I won't get into frequency or anything. So, and then once that's in, then you're going to want a mulch over the top. And what this does is allows water to be retained within the planting basin. And this helps not only the microbial activity to flourish, but also reduces evapotranspiration. So that's kind of the gist of the best way to install plants. And if there's any questions, we can talk about that later. So, so now lastly, okay, they're in. Now what do you do? Now, even native plants need food and water. So you're going to need to water them. And here's an example of it, the drip irrigation hose. So typically your ornamental landscaping is going to need a lot more water than your native plants. So you probably are going to need to have it on a separate station on your irrigation, just kind of treat it separately. And the big key to native plants is you think about how they live in the wild. It rains and then it dries out. And then maybe a week or two later or never, it rains again. So in the establishment phase and even beyond that, if you want to continue watering them, you're going to soak it and allow it to dry down. And the reason for that is because if you just are watering every day, the root system becomes very shallow. And so if your irrigation ever fails, you go on vacation, something happens, you're going to lose your plants. And so you really want them to go find other water sources and kind of establish deeper root system. So you're going to want to allow the soil to dry out. So you may not water every day. You may water initially if it's too hot, every other day. It just really depends on how droughty your soils are. But the key is to establish deep root growth. The first year, I also recommend that you feed them because they're still young and they're growing and they're still establishing. They don't have, they're not, they haven't had a chance to spread their roots out. So I would feed them the first year with maybe some compost tea, something liquid like a fish emulsion or a seaweed. And these are all the fish emulsion and seaweed's commercially available. Compost tea is usually kind of twice a year that we sell it through the CNPS. So, and then continue to have some mulch around it, and that really allows the soil biology to develop and keep the soil cool. And then, of course, keep it weed-free around the plants because that's just competition. So in conclusion, you need to think about the right location for the plant you want to establish. You want to make sure it's weed-free before you plant it. You want to install them with amendments and water and feed them based on the plant needs. So that's it. Any questions?
We've got such a small group. If folks would like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. There's nothing in the chat right now, so feel free. If anyone's got a question, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about the mulch. After you've planted the plant, mulching is great, but what I learned from the round fire going up into Squall after that fire is plants that have been mulched with bark died because the sparks landed in the bark and started to burn, and ones that were not mulched, if the fire hadn't blasted through there, survived. And so another great mulch is gravel instead of, if you're concerned about fire, which we all,
That definitely is an alternative.
yeah.
It's basically covering the soil is really what you want to accomplish.
Julie, it looks like we have a question from Donna. What's the website, the link to the online soil map and the NRCS map that you
Let
showed?
me see if I can pull it up real quick on Google. Hold on.
Okay,
And I'll put it on the in chat.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I pulled something up, but I'll let you do it. So
Okay.
it's been there before.
Okay, this is copy. Okay, I'm going to put it back in chat to everyone. This is the NRCS, and you're going to hit the green button, and that gets you there. So it's a real fun tool to play with if you're a soil geek like me. And like once you get to the soil series, you can also Google soil. That's pretty cool, soil series, and get more information. And there's a lot of resources out there and kind of understand your soils.
I was just going to say, Julie, I think you're making soil geeks out of a lot of us, very surprisingly in my case. So I love what you teach us.
Yeah, I have a couple questions that popped up actually, and I'm curious, the backfill you're talking about, do you mix that all together, or because I noticed you said dust the mycorrhizal with the roots, so I'm assuming you don't mix it all together, or what's the, yeah.
There's different ways you can go about it. So for the mycorrhizal fungi, they really need root connection. So with that particular one, I would make sure it just connects the root ball. And then the rest, usually what I do is I'll mix it up separately. So I'll take my wheelbarrow, I'll take some of the native soil, I'll add the compost and the biochar and kind of mix it up. And then I'll put it back. I put the plant in first, and then I put the soil in afterward, the backfill in afterwards. So that's, I mean, that's the ideal way, but I've also known people just to dump and not mix it, just go straight in. So just put the compost in and be done with it. So it just really depends how many plants and how much time you want to spend. But that's the way I would recommend it.
Okay.
And Julie, I've got a question for established native plants. So I put the ones in from Katie. Oh, I guess they've been in 3 years now, maybe 4, I think 3 years. And it's apricot mallow, and I forget what the other one is, but they're doing really well. Should I put some compost tea? Should I water with compost tea if I purchase some?
Yeah, I think, you know, it would, they'd be very happy if you gave them some compost tea, and I would put it just right in, you know, just dump it right on the soil. So, and you can dilute it. The stuff that I prepare is kind of a super concentrate, so it goes a long way if you wanted to. And you just, yeah, I mean, these are all plant helpers. That's what compost tea, it helps the plant just be stronger. And you know that this year is going to be droughty and maybe just as hot as last year, and so that all helps. So definitely helps plants stay happy. So
Thanks.
I think we have a couple other advice for eliminating a launch. I just remove some each year all at once. Well, Donna, depends how much work you want to do. So a lot of people just do sections at a time, so you're not getting overwhelmed. It depends on how large your lawn is. And so, but it does take it, like if you're Bermuda grass, it's, you know, you could just plastic it all summer, and then you're ready for this fall to put some plants in. So it really just depends on how big your lawn is and how motivated you are. Some people just want to get it done, and some people only want to do little parts each year to not get overwhelmed and make it not fun. So Nell says, I have a bag of bone meal that I use for bulb planting, but there's any application for native plants? Yeah, so bone meal provides calcium. And so it really, like in the mesa here, we already have a ton of calcium in the soil, so you probably wouldn't need it. But you may like if you're downtown Bishop, it would be helpful because the soils are a little bit higher pH. And so bone meal, provides calcium, and the lower the pH, the less it's available. So yeah, it won't hurt. And if you have it already, you definitely add to it. So.
I have a couple other questions I'm learning a lot right now. How often do you recommend or suggest adding compost? Is it just a kind of a one-time thing before putting the plant in the ground?
So I am a compostaholic, I have to confess. And, native plants don't need as much organic matter. So if you're just looking at a fruit tree, the more organic matter, the better. But for native plants, I would not go overboard because they don't really need it. So, out in nature, particularly where we live in the high desert, you can see that there's not a lot of organic matter. What we don't see is there's a lot of fungal and microbial activity that's tied to the plant. So the most important thing is kind of reestablishing the microbial community. And so compost does help. And that's why one of the reasons why we want to add some initially. But I don't think you need, and maybe Katie, you can add to this, I don't think it needs a ton of organic matter.
No, I mean, look where they grow. Our native plants, don't have compost. So I don't think, once you've planted them, I think they're okay. But your non-native plants, your Gucci things in the garden, yes, definitely. They aren't grown to, or haven't evolved to grow here. So we're asking them to do a lot.
Yeah, and once they establish, they create their own depth underneath it. And so that, that's kind of their own organic matter, but you're right, it's just minimal. So I would just start out with some and.
Okay. And do you know why there isn't much mycorrhizal community anymore? Or
There is, like what the science has shown, that the more you disturb a soil, the more it kills off, particularly the soil fungi, and the soil fungi are a really important component of desert soils. And that's kind of what we are. We're in a desert soil. Microbes tend to still survive, but as there's less soil disturbance, the fungal activity can actually come back, but it just takes a long time. And so that's where you see certain plants like tumbleweed that occurs under highly disturbed conditions, and it's harder to get like some of the black brushes and some of the latter successional plants because actually the soil fungi that help so much has been disturbed. So it's an interaction that's been tied together, and we just, we can't see these things, so we're not thinking about them. And so it's there. The soil, there's a lot of soil biology that happens, and it's just, we gotta bring it back.
So I'm thinking about, so the mycorrhiza needs moisture, right? To be happy.
And it usually gets it from the plants. So there's a lot of sharing that goes on, and that's why they kind of invade the root. So the plant provides a lot of the needs, but the mycorrhizal fungi has been known to go out and find water for the plants in themselves and bring it back to the plant. So it's a very interesting relationship.
So I'm thinking this year, there's not going to be a lot of moisture in the upper surface water, So is the mycorrhiza just out in the desert, not in our gardens? Will the mycorrhiza just go down the roots deeper you think?
Yeah, so they create this big network that we can't really see. And so, they may end up using more of the carbohydrates for the plant and work harder to go try to find more. But they'll probably go into a deeper soil profile if they can. That's, where you have more water because less evaporation. And
right.
So, definitely.
Any other questions right now? Well, maybe while a few more questions are percolating, I just want to share for those, because there's some new names here. So if you're in Bishop and you can go by ESLT's Native Plant Demonstration Garden, when we first moved into that building, I think it's been I think it's 5 years ago, this spring and summer is when we did all the work. It had a big, beautiful crabgrassy lawn that months of trying to dig it out and hardcore volunteer work. Katie was one, John Louth was other, a bunch of people came and we solarized there. And then when we planted the garden, Julie donated a lot of compost tea for us before we put Katie's plants in. And if you go by and look at the garden, especially right now, because we just did a volunteer work day out there this week and it's looking really, really lovely right now. But you can see what, I mean, we solarized the soil, so that killed off the bad stuff and the good stuff. And then Julie put in all this wonderful compost tea. Then we put these beautiful, healthy baby plants in, and just dramatic success at the garden. And it's a combination of all those things. And I know what the ones I was planting, I was talking to as I was putting them into and say, here, little babies.
I noticed in the pictures, I guess anyway, a picture on the website, the advertising current stuff was an older picture and it had a massive apricot mallow, which now has been replaced by a massive lupin. So even in 5 years, it's interesting how that garden has changed just by, you know, some plants died and other ones volunteered. And yeah, native gardens are kind of fun that way, is that because they're native, they will self-seed like crazy sometimes. And yeah, they die, others die, and then you have different plants that replace them.
I have a question that just popped up thinking of the tea and all the things you were saying that you could also add to the soil. The seaweed, I'm curious about, or kelp, we're saying, I guess, interchangeable, but how does that benefit? I've never heard of that before.
So those are two organic options. And so both seaweed, kelp actually has a ton of micronutrients. And studies have shown that a lot of times that's actually limiting. It's kind of like us, like we need a balanced diet. And, you know, we actually need cyanide, for example, but if you have too much of it, you're going to die. But if you don't have any of it, then you're also going to be in trouble. So iron, so that's what seaweed has. It's a lot of these trace minerals and micronutrients, and I love it. And it also has, you know, some other kind of the macro things, but it's really organic, inexpensive. Yeah, I think Neptune's Harvest is the brand that I use. And I like it because it's in liquid format. And so you can just add it to some water and hose it in. So, and it doesn't need much, but, you know, I would say when you're establishing it, I do it at least one more time after you establish it. And it just gives it a little bit of boost. Because, you know, all plants, like humans, we all need nutrients. We need water and we need nutrients. And so it really depends on, like, in the Mesa, the soils are terrible. And so that might need, but if you're like downtown Bishop, you may not need nearly as much. So it just really depends on what's out there and what you're planting in.
Okay. Yeah, because I just purchased a bag of kelp powder for kind of just for experimenting with food, but I'm curious, that's probably just as doable if I mix that with water and pour it into the soil.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about like the humic and fulvic acid, that fulvic acid, which is the gold color. I know people that drink it. So there's a lot of, you know, crossovers between, you know, the animal population and the plant population.
Okay.
Any other questions, Nell or Donna or Jill? Randy or Katie or Gabrielle?
I feel like I've asked a lot of questions, but I could definitely find more.
I'm looking forward to when we can have live events again and kind of all gather. And I missed the pizza truck, I have to admit, for the big event you always throw.
We'll do it again. We will do it again. We will.
Hopefully next year.
Yeah, I know. Exciting times. And Katie, do you want to just give a quick I know you've got a talk coming up in
Mhm.
the next couple of weeks as well, but would you like to share more about the native plant sale right now as well?
Yeah, actually, okay, so we're gonna do the online sale, the spring one in May. And we'll send out the URL and post it on your website and ours and our Facebook page on May 10th. And so you'll be able to buy plants through the 14th and then pick them up the morning of the 15th out at the research station. There isn't a lot of plants because we had a really good fall sale, so I didn't have a lot of plants that carried over. So I'll warn you of that. And so not a lot of choice of varieties and stuff. However, there will be a lot at the fall sale, especially penstemons, because I did a bunch of experimenting this year. We'll have Julie's compost tea for sale at the spring sale, and our t-shirts and memberships. And actually the state office is offering the general $50 memberships for $30, just if you buy plants at the spring sale. So if you want to become a member, or you want to renew your membership, now's the time to do it, or during that sale is. That's a good deal. And really what the best deal is, I think, about the membership is it gets you into the fall sale a day early, before the general public gets that URL. So you'll have first crack at the plants. So then the fall sale, it's not really a fall sale, the August sale, I think is also going to end up being online. From what I've talking with Stephen, who's the director out at the station. They don't really want to do a in-person sale yet. So that will be August 15th, well, August 16th through the 19th for the general public, and the 15th that'll be open for members and the people that are getting the, if they're the grantees from the pollinator gardens. And the pickup will be on Saturday for the general public and Friday for the grantees. What else could I say? Guess that's about it, really.
That was great. Thank you.
Unless anybody else has a question about the sales.
I think there was a question from Donna. Is there any seed sharing and plant sharing going on with local native plant growers?
No, there isn't. I'll have a few varieties of plants with seed packets for sale. I heard that today the tribe is selling they're selling seeds of native plants. But I don't know how that works. And yeah, because there isn't the in-person thing of the plants that, like Garden Fest, there isn't really a seed exchange going on.
We at ESLT, we did have a bunch of seeds. We can look to see what we have. I don't know their viability. We'd have to look and see. And if anyone was interested, depending on the day, we could put them outside in a safe way, and you could come by and look through them in a safe way if you'd like. That's something we can do. I just honestly don't know their viability. They've been in those little containers for a while now.
This is Donna. Hey, I'd love to get some seeds. My experience is that a lot of seeds last a lot longer than people think.
Okay, well, Donna, why don't you connect in with Gabrielle, or Gabrielle, you've got Donna's information. You can
Yeah.
do some outreach, and then you guys can collaborate and figure out where we could put that. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Gabrielle, but we'll look for it. We'll find out, put it out for you, Donna, and you can take a peek.
Okay, or I think I'll probably be having Gabrielle come out to look at my luxuriant lawn.
Yeah.
Maybe she can bring them then.
Okay, that sounds great.
Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Donna. Sounds good.
Great, thank you.
I have some lawn advice. I'll chip in on lawn removal. My back lawn was crabgrass or Bermuda grass, and my front lawn wasn't. And so my front lawn, I didn't water for a year and it died. And then we lightly rototilled it to get just the grass out. And then I covered it in plastic for a year, the whole summer. And then we planted into it, and it definitely sprayed the area with compost tea, since we had so thoroughly killed anything in the soil. And it's been great. I haven't had any grass come back. Highly recommend that. However, in the
Okay.
backyard with the Bermuda grass, it was quite a pretty large lawn, and I removed half of it. I did use Roundup, and we let it die, and then we dug it up. And because I wasn't going to give up any topsoil to the dump, and beat out all the dirt, and then solarize that in plastic before I put it back in the ground. And I am still chasing, little pieces of Bermuda grass. I didn't solarize after I had used the Roundup. And I think you could use you could solarize the Bermuda grass, because we did that in the community garden down at in the park, and that worked really well the first year. The thing with Bermuda grass, no matter how you treat it, is you're going to get some of it coming back. And you need to get on it right away and dig up every little friggin' piece that you find. Otherwise, it will quickly come back. As a drought tolerant grass, it is awesome. You don't have to water it. And then when you water it again, it will come back. But of course, it doesn't stay where you want it to. It has to go everywhere. So, but no matter what you do, if you are removing grass, make sure you do that well before you put in new plants. Otherwise, you will be beating yourself over the head for the rest of your life, chasing out, trying to get rid of grass that has now infiltrated your plants. We've had to remove beautiful cactus out of the garden down in the park because the grass is so thick into it, and there's no way you can weed around a cactus.
No.
And John, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to assume you're the person that asked, should you remove all your lawn or pieces of it? And my advice is it depends how strong your back is. So I would do sections, unless you're going to pay somebody with a tractor to come and take the whole thing out all at once.
Yeah, I've debated about that.
Yeah. And how big your lawn is too, but.
Okay, thank you.
Crabgrass is a lot of work, even when it's dead. It
Yeah.
has very thick roots. I'm sorry, Kay, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just being snarky and sarcastic about the cactus. Because I have hundreds of little tiny fine cactus needles in my legs from my tunic, I think, blowing into the cactus when we were out there on Tuesday, and then blowing back onto my leg. I mean, I had tights on, but yeah, I have hundreds still. So yeah, be careful around the cactus.
Have you tried the duct tape?
Yeah, we tried 8 different kinds of tape.
Okay.
Definitely some worked better than others, but they just didn't get it all.
I think the hospital, they use Elmer's glue.
Oh,
They put Elmer's glue on and then peel it off. And sometimes that'll help rip out those little glaucoids.
thank you. I'll give that a try, because it's, yeah,
Yeah.
they're slowly resolving, and they don't hurt, which is the good thing, because they're just, unless you touch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so be careful around cactus.
Yes. Be careful where you plant it.
Yeah, I think that's the better clue for the ESLT garden too. Well, Julie, thank you so much. You're so amazing. I learn every time I listen to you talk. I learn more and more. So thank you so much.
Welcome.
And actually,
thank you
Julie,
so
can you tell us how much a quart and a gallon of compost tea will cost?
We could talk about that. How about offline?
Okay.
And then just figure out how you're going to post it on your website. So,
Yeah, and how are you going to, you said you might need help collecting bottles?
yeah, it just depends on how many people order. I hoard plastic jugs, but I don't know if, depending how large the order is. So I have half gallons. We'll sell it by half gallon and 1 gallon. And so we'll just have to figure out the price. So, but it goes a long way. So you can always.
So everybody collect jugs.
Yeah. Okay.
Gallon jugs.
You'll want this in your garden, people. I'm telling you. Julie gave me some. Was it last year? No, it wasn't last year. It was the year before. Year before. And yeah, just a big. She came over, brewed a big thing here. Just let me put it in the yard garden.
Yep, I just did a huge thing for my fruit trees. So, because this is not just for native plants, it's going to go in the veggie garden, it can go in fruit trees. Every plant loves this stuff. So, but the stuff I do for CNPS does have some native, local that the native plants will be happy with. So it's a little different than just garden stuff. But yeah, I have a 60-gallon brewer, and so I have capacity.
How many compost bins piles do you have going at your new house?
Well, I don't have bins going because we just moved in December. And so there's lots of leaves around here. So I probably will this summer, this fall, kind of get things going. So right now I've just been new house on an acre. So lots to do.
A lot of work.
Well, we want to be respectful of time. We have a couple of minutes left, but I just want to thank you all for coming and joining us on this Saturday. And we'll hopefully put the recording up somewhere, maybe if folks missed it, because this was really helpful. I learned a lot. Yeah, wow. And so thank you very much, Julie. And I think I'll send this link to folks afterwards of the soil survey, just so we can have it, and if you want to use that. And don't hesitate to reach out with any questions too. Yeah, you can email me. Yeah.
And Gabrielle, can you just share quickly what the next, the date and topic of the next workshop in case people are interested?
Yes, so the next workshop is on the 26th, I believe that's a Monday of April, and it's going to be Roberta of Inyo and Mono Master Gardeners. She did a drip irrigation workshop that is recorded and on our YouTube from last year. So she's going to be going over that as well as mostly a Q&A session. I think she really wants to have people come with questions and qualms and curiosities about that. So yeah, if you're interested, you can watch that ahead of time, or you don't have to. You can just come with some questions you have. She's super knowledgeable about irrigation, so that's our next one, and it's going to be at 12 to 1 p.m. on Monday, April 26th. And also that information and the RSVP information for that is the same place that you found that information for this web workshop on our events page on ESLT events. I think that's, yeah. And then keep looking at that page because there's more to come in May.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us on a beautiful Saturday. I hope you can get out and break some fingernails or get some dirt in your fingernails. And thank you, Julie, again. I can't thank you enough for how you're helping educate us all on soil. Thank you. And it's good to have you as a neighbor. Yay.
Yeah.
Just
Yay.
across the highway. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.